Hi, it's Juliet. Welcome back to my studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make encased stringer. And this is stringer with an opaque core and a transparent encasing on it. It makes the stringer nice and stiff, and you can vary the tone and the intensity of the color using this technique. The other thing I'm going to show you is how to make twisted cane. And these are great elements to use as decorations in beads or bead sets. To do the cane, the tools that you need are a set of cane pullers, and I have this pair from Corina Beads that I like. They have a disc on the end, which is good for building up your cane, and then you can use the two of them together to pull it and twist it. And the other side of them has thick stainless steel, which is also good for building up cane and twisties and things like that. And they have the nice wooden section in the middle, which is good on your hands. So when I pull the encased stringer, I will be just using the the glass rods themselves to pull it, so I don't really need any other specialized tool, except perhaps a marver for marvering the encasing before I pull it. So that's it. Let's get started. You can use a pair of regular mandrels, or if you have a pair with wooden handles like I have, those make it really nice because the wood is a larger diameter and it's easier to hold when you're pulling the stringer or the twisties. Alright, so I got my torch fired up, and if you're using a lighter like I am, make sure you put it away someplace safe. Mine's stored in the drawer off to the side where it can't have hot molten glass flying and landing on it. Okay, so I'm going to make my twisty a base of the 242 blue. You're going to want to make a number of different twisties for this project in different colors and blends so that you have some variety. I already have a few that I've made that are sitting on my desk, but I want to make some with a blue base. So what I'm doing is heating up the tip of my mandrel and heating up the tip of my rod. And I'm going to just wrap it on there and get a bit of a base. And then what I'm going to do is essentially build up a fat rod shape. I am heating the glass and I am pushing it. You'll notice that the mandrel, or the active part where I'm adding glass, is just to the left of my flame, and my rod is in the flame. If I want to make it wider, I can push harder. If I want it to be a narrower base of this dark cobalt blue, then I can push lighter and just wind it on a little bit more gently. The idea here is to end up with something even and fairly cylinder-like. We don't need a whole lot since I'm just making one bead. So I'm only going to make this maybe half an inch, 3/4 of an inch long. If you were making a lot of marini for a larger set of beads, then you might want to make it a little bit longer. Okay, so that's on there now, and I want to give it a bit of heat, and then I'm going to marver it into more of a cylinder shape. And I am using a brass marvering pad, which I have down here on my workbench. You want to try to make it straight on there if you can, or as straight as you can. And if you have little divots and ridges, you do want to smooth those out, because we will be applying some colors to it next. And the smoother it is, the easier it is to get them on, and the less likely there's to be a gap, and then it melts and you have a hole. And yeah, just make it easier on yourself and get it into a nice round cylindrical shape. Okay, that's pretty good. So now I'm going to take a commercial stringer of 212, and I'm going to stripe that down one side. So I want the blue base to be hot, but I don't want it to be so hot that it will easily deform. I am starting at the root, and I am putting on my green stringer, taking it all the way up to the tip, and then I'm flame cutting it. And while that's hot, I'm going to melt it in a little bit, and just gently push down and make a little bit of a flat section on there. And for this one, I'm going to take my turquoise and put one stripe of it down the other side of the bead. Now, depending on what you want the final twisty to look like, you could put it directly opposite, and you will have the green and the turquoise as an even spiral. If you want them a little closer together with a bigger blue gap in between, then you would put the turquoise spiral closer to the green, which is what I'm going to do right now. And I am heating my stringer. My blue base is below the flame. Get the end a little bit hot. Just tap that down slightly. Okay, so next I want to melt these ends, beginning ends in, and just push that little bit back to the mandrel. That will help me to pull it out a little more evenly, and I'll ensure that every inch that I get out of this cane is twisted evenly, or it has the same even amount application of color. So if you want a twisty that has some texture, you could leave these a little bit raised when you go to twist and pull it. But if you want one that's smooth, so if you feel down the twisty, you don't feel bumps and ridges, then you need to melt it in ahead of time. I'm probably gonna just kind of go for something in the middle in the interest of time here. Maybe help marver these in a little bit using my brass marver. Okay, so now I'm taking my second mandrel, and I'm going to get the tip of it red hot and glowing. What I'm going to do is insert it in the end of this blob of glass. And once I insert it, I'm going to make motions fore and aft and up and down. So it's like an east, west, north, south motion. That will ensure that it's anchored real well in there. So I want the tip of the glass to be hot and the tip of the mandrel to be hot. I'm only pushing it in a millimeter or two, right, left, up, down. Now it's good and anchored. So now I need to heat up this blob of glass in between, and I want to heat it evenly. Every time I cross over the middle, it's getting heated twice for each heat on the end. So you usually, after a little bit, I get into a rhythm where I put on one end, I rotate it, go the other side and rotate it, other side and rotate it, and I go back and forth. That balances out the amount of time I'm spending on both the ends and the middle. Then it gets to the point where it's soft enough and you can start to push it together. And once you get to that stage, then you know the core is starting to get hot as well. But you have to keep heating it beyond that part. Make sure when you're turning, you're not imparting any twist at this point. Generally, we have one hand that's more dominant than the other. So when we're rotating, one hand will tend to rotate faster than the other. But you can watch the lines. Okay, so this is pretty molten and soupy, and I'm feeling like it's ready to go. I'm going to put a little bit of extra insurance heat in my mandrels so that things stay attached. I'm going to take it out of the flame. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to start twisting. And I am twisting one hand away from me, the other hand towards me, and I am pulling it. I can also just kind of brush it into the flame, just the edges, to get a little bit more heat because my right side was a little bit thicker than the left side, and that will help it balance out. So as you can see, it's not a particularly long twisty. It's only about maybe 4 or 5 inches long, but I'm only going to be doing one bead with it, so that's good enough. Now to cut it, I usually take my trusty old pliers here, touch them in the water, and the water helps shock that right off. I can put that in my water bowl and touch the other end of it down and let that rest and cool off and melt the other end off. If I was going to be doing another twisty, I would just reheat those ends right up. I wouldn't worry too much about getting the glass off and just keep using it for the next batch. So I'm going to just set those aside and I'll finish cleaning them up later. I'll be back in a second. Okay, so the first step is to heat up the last 3/4 of an inch or inch of your base rod that's going to be on the inside. So while I'm warming that up, I just want to warm it so that the glass will stick to it and it won't shock. I'm also warming up the green. And so the idea here is to get a small pearl or a pea-sized gather on the end of the rod. And then we are going to use a snowplow technique to encase the white with it. So I'm going to just stripe down my inch or so, turn it a little bit, gather, stripe down the next part. And you can marver it as you go. You will get some ridges, but those will, you know, when you melt it all down, those will just naturally disappear. So again, melting a pea-sized gather and pushing down the snowplow technique. And the snowplow technique means that the glass rod that I'm pushing is at an angle. It's not straight up and down like this. It's pushing that way. So it leaves a fairly thin encasing. If you wanted to make the encasing thicker on your encased stringer, you could do an around the whirl technique. You could have your green glass at less of an angle, and that will place more glass on it as well. You just want to be consistent the whole way around if you're looking for a consistent encased stringer. Okay, so now I want to kind of heat up those little blobs at the end, and I will marver those a little bit. And then heat the rest down in. And then I'm going to use my green rod as like the tool on one end. I'm going to attach it as a punty. And I want a hot join here, so they're both hot when I join it. And now I'm just going to melt in that inch or so of encased white with the green. I'm going back and forth and not hovering in one place too much. Since my white rod on my left hand is a softer rod, I don't want to get too much heat down there because it will pull out too thin. The green will be stiffer. So once I've got the thing pliable and I can push and pull it, I can see the whole blob is actually moving, so it's molten to its core. I'm taking out of the heat. Right now I am below the flame. And I'm going to turn it a bit until the glow goes, and then I'm going to begin pulling. And the speed at which I pull is going to dictate the thickness of it. You may want to pull a little faster at the end, and then it'll get firm, and you want to hold it until it firms up before you go to cut it. So you can see out of this size gather, I got probably about 14, maybe 16 inches of encased stringer. I'm going to turn my propane off, and I'm going to just use my tool to cut it free and set it there to cool, and there you have it, encased stringer. Be sure to check out part 2 of our video, where I'll show you how to use the encased stringers and the twisties to make a bead style which I call amalgamation beads. Here are some examples. It can be used for large focal beads or for collections of smaller beads, which are great for jewelry. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.